Welcome to Wayne County Connection. I'm your host, Michael Swigert. Wayne County Connection promotes Wayne County as a great place to work, live, and play. We do that by connecting you with our guests, which are individuals and the agencies that they represent that are doing their part to make Wayne County a great place to work, live, and play. You can find out more about today's program and past programs by visiting our website at waynet.org/cc. There you can also find links to our program, which airs on demand and streaming live when it's broadcast on Channel 11 on WCTV. We thank you for watching again, and we're excited this month to have back a guest who has been on the show before. Actually, the agency has been on the show before, but our guest is brand new. We're excited to welcome to our show Joanna Hahn. She is the Central Regional Director for State Historic Sites with the based at the Levi Coffin House in Fountain City, and I got a little distracted there trying to get things clicked around there. Joanna, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
And I said that wrong already, even though we talked about it right before we started the program. It's the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site.
That's right.
Yes. Right. The last time the show was on the feature of the Levi Coffin House, it was just Levi Coffin House. It was before that takeover. And we're going to learn more about that in just a couple of minutes. But I'd like to start the program by welcoming you and by asking you to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I have been now at the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site for about 4 years, and previously spent 13 years at the Indiana State Museum in downtown Indianapolis. So my background coming here was mainly in museum education and doing programs, special programs and such, dealing with student audiences and teachers, but was ready for sort of a new challenge in my career and wanting to stay in museums, and very lucky to work in a statewide system because we're part of the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, to where those opportunities can be available. And so not long after my husband and I moved to Delaware County to live on a farm and live that farm life, I started inquiring about becoming site manager here. The site was going through a big transition from being managed for the state by the Levi Coffin House Association, a volunteer group, to all the formal operations and management of the site going to the Indiana State Museum and that system. And was grateful to have the opportunity to do that. So so as I said, I've been here about 4 years, and with that, a lot of change and transitions has happened for the site especially.
Yes, and it has been a site in the area. It's been a museum run mostly by local volunteers for decades, and we'll learn more about that in just a moment. What I'd like to do now is to ask you if you could give, maybe our viewers are new, give an overview, maybe a 30,000-foot view of what the Levi and Catharine Coffin site is, because it's really a full site now.
Yeah, so what we focus on is we interpret how Levi and his wife, Catharine Coffin, lived here in Fountain City, which was historically known as Newport. They were here from 1826 to 1847. And were very instrumental in organizing and managing what we call the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was a very regional effort throughout the United States, especially in northern states and here in Wayne County. Levi and Catharine Coffin were very central to that happening here. They were active, practicing Quakers, like many folks that were living in Wayne County at that time, and felt that their beliefs as Quakers drove them to the actions of helping freedom seekers or runaway slaves. So as part of the experience here at the site, we give guided tours of their 1839 home. It's a home that's been completely restored back to as it would have looked during the decade the Coffins lived there. And while we take you through a guided tour of the house, we reflect on stories that have survived here locally by people who knew the Coffins, as well as stories from Levi Coffin's autobiography that he published right before his death. So we also try to include a lot about his wife, Catharine, which is why when we opened the site, we renamed it the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site, because they were very much a team in this endeavor. We can't give Levi all the credit. And so we talk about their lives in that house, how they were able to use the house in helping freedom seekers, as well as talking about some of the freedom seekers themselves and what their experience was like as part of their escape from slavery and the time they spent with the Coffins. So on top of that, now we have an interpretive center, which is one of the new things that we've transitioned to sort of expand on the story of the Coffins. So with the interpretive center, we have an orientation theater where we show a video before your tour. And we have a nice self-guided exhibit called Soul Seeking Safety, which expands more on the history of slavery and the Underground Railroad in the United States.
And that's really interesting because that leads into my next question, which is the last time we focused on the Levi Coffin house, it was just mostly the home, and they were already in transition to develop this interpretive center right across the street, right next door, really. Tell us a little bit about that, more about the interpretive center. Yeah, I know you mentioned a couple of things, but tell us a little bit about that structure itself and what visitors can expect there.
So the building itself, there was a historic structure that sat here originally, and that was a contemporary building to when the Coffins lived in their home. So this is where their neighbor lived. And so the Levi Coffin House Association, at the time that they were operating the site, really wanted to turn that building into some sort of visitor center or some place where, you know, sort of those normal operations for a museum take place, like taking your tickets and having a gift shop. One of the things this site really needed were restrooms. There were no public restrooms. So there are just certain things that were needed to make the site more accessible, to make the operating of the site easier. A lot of that stuff was happening in the historic structure of the house itself. And for preservation reasons, you really don't want that to happen. You're putting a lot of undue stress on that building when you're really trying to preserve it. So the building next door was bought. It took some time to, through a capital campaign, to raise the funds and such. But eventually we were able, with the Indiana State Museum of Historic Sites, be able to make that a reality. So like I said, when you come, this is where you get your ticket. We have the orientation theater, which really gives you a good sense of the history you're going to learn about on the guided tour. It's a way that it serves as an introduction. That's why it's called orientation. And, but like I said, you know, just restrooms and a gift shop. We do some of our special programs that we host here, our public programs we host here in the Interpretive Center as well. So it has a multi-purpose use, but again, it keeps us from having to stress out the house so that we can continue to preserve it and have it available for guided tours, which is really what its key role for the site is.
And one of the things that the Interpretive Center offered or made available was more accessibility for visitors. The Coffin home itself is a kind of a small structure. It's large for the time, but in today's standards, it's kind of small. I've been through with groups of fourth graders, and it gets kind of crowded in those small spaces, and climbing up and down the stairs isn't always the easiest either.
Well, I joke with my visitors when I do tours, is you have to remember when Levi had the house built, it was not for us to use it for what we're using it now. It was for him and his family to live in. We do broach the topic on the tour and look at that it may have also been used, again, for the purpose of better aiding the freedom seekers that by that time they've spent 13 years doing in Newport, and then the house was built for them. They moved into the home. So we do look at some of those factors as well. But you know, now it's a little easier when those 100 fourth graders come in one day. They're not all in the house at the same time. So we're able to space them out, spend some time in the Interpretive Center. Half the group can go on a tour. We'll swap the groups. So it does make sort of the management of the site and the visitation a lot easier.
And we've mentioned it a couple of times now, the fourth graders, the site is part of the Indiana history curriculum here for the state of Indiana, but you have visitors from other areas as well that come for educational purposes, school groups and so forth. Talk a little bit about the way and the types of groups that you host at the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic.
Well, with Levi and Catharine being Quakers, the site actually draws a lot of current Quakers, not just in the state, but from around the country. So I don't know if you would say that this is a pilgrimage for them, but obviously Levi and Catharine are figures in the history of their church and what they did. And so many make a point to come and visit and learn more about them as Quakers and sort of how their Quaker beliefs drove them to their Underground Railroad work. We get international, of course, with Earlham being, right up the road in Richmond, and Earlham's has a fair number of foreign students who come and to learn on their campus. A lot of times, most of those students will visit at least once, because Earlham really sees us as sort of a representation of the local history and such. And I'm sure some of the things that we talk about align a lot with their social activism and justice that they really teach there at Earlham. We get, I think last year we had visitors from around 45 American states. I'm not sure about international countries, I always lose track of that sometimes because I'm not always the one here saying hi to everybody. So, but we collect zip codes because we want to know like what kind of geographical reach are we drawing people. And Levi is definitely not just an Indiana person, if you know what I mean. It doesn't just attract Hoosier visitors; it attracts people from all over.
So we've talked a couple of times about the purpose of the house probably being built specifically as a stop on the Underground Railroad for persons who are seeking freedom from the institution of slavery, it's notably in the South. And there were a lot of laws in place and societal pressures in place to stop that from happening. So it wasn't like you just have guests into your home and have them sit down. They were, just traveling across the state. It was a clandestine effort, and it was secretive and ran risks for the people that were involved. So talk a little bit about what we think and the ways that we know that the house was used for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. So Levi does give us several stories in his book that, we feel confident happened within the walls of the house that we do our tours in, and we try to draw from those stories and tell those in the house. But Levi didn't give us all the answers, as I say. When he wrote his book, he was toward the end of his life. I heard once from one of the volunteers from their research that his editor was getting mad because he kept wanting to put stories in. So I don't know if they finally said stop or they edited some stories out. But one of the things he doesn't tell us is why the house is built the way it is. And when you compare it to a lot of similar historic structures in this region, what's interesting is when Coffin had the house built, he made sure a basement area was included. Often a basement is just a root cellar. It's a place to just, store your extra food and to keep it cool. But the way that the basement is laid out gives us the impression that it was used as a kitchen. So there's a fireplace down there. It's a very deep basement for the time. And included in there, which has a root cellar for that food storage, in the root cellar there is an active well, or a fountain well, as Levi would call, which is partly the inspiration for our town's name now, Fountain City. So Levi, anyone living here, even today, knows how high the water table is. Levi seemed to take advantage of that knowledge and having an indoor well. And we think all of this is in service, again, of those that we're trying to help, but also maybe trying to dampen some suspicion about what they were doing. Because Levi says, I know at times I was being watched. I know that there were people who were very much gunning to try to catch him in the act of helping enslaved individuals. So because a slave escapes slavery, just because they come to the North does not make them free. They're actually considered fugitives by the law, the fugitive slave law that existed at that time. So Levi and Catharine are breaking the law by just inviting them into their home and providing them what we just see as things that you would do for any person that needs help, providing food, providing shelter, providing those basic needs, and then also helping them further on down, or up, I should say, north. So they may have been trying to, again, try to hide how many people may have been in the house at one time with that particular space. But he didn't give us any stories about it.
Right. With an indoor well, there wouldn't be somebody going out in the middle of the night to draw water or prepare a meal, as it were.
He says the largest group they helped at one time in the home was 17 people. Can you imagine how much water that is, right?
Wow.
In a 24-hour period.
Right.
So yeah, we just feel that that's very intentional for what they're trying to accomplish.
And one of the things that fourth graders in particular like is the compartment on the second story in a bedroom that was probably used to hide people who were.
Yeah. So he, again, because of their actions being illegal, Levi knew the threat of his house possibly being searched was a big possibility. And you never know sometimes when and who it's going to be. So you have to be prepared. And there's one particular story where he talks of hiding 14 in what he calls the garret. We would call it an attic or a closet space today. But it definitely is long enough, we think, to accommodate that many people. It was not a comfortable experience for them. We also don't know how long they were in there. But the story was confirmed by a family member of his who lived here and spent most of his life in Newport. And and we know that space was hidden by furniture in an effort that if the house was searched, they wouldn't realize that there's a small door in the wall. So the space itself may not be unusual for what it may have originally intended to be, but the evidence shows us that it was used for other purposes.
what other artifacts or information would a visitor expect to see when they come to the site?
So we really highlight the fact that the house is our main artifact, because most of the stories we're going to tell centers on what happened in the home. But we do try to point out other objects and artifacts that are in the home that have been donated over the decades. We do have objects that we can loosely tie to Levi and Catharine, either through Levi's life as a businessman, because he was in dry goods. So we have several items in the house that he sold at different periods in his dry goods store here in Fountain City, as well as later in Cincinnati. We have some objects that relate to family members of theirs. There's a wash basin that supposedly was brought from North Carolina by his uncle Bethuel to Indiana, and then that was given to the site by his descendants in memory of him and his relationship with Levi. Levi talks about his uncle in his book. Then we have other objects that are donated that just relate to other well-known Quakers of the period. Some of the first Quaker families, like the Hoovers, who settled in Richmond and such, helped to create Richmond. So we have certain objects that we can sort of pause in the tour and somehow connect. But unfortunately, we have nothing really personal of the Levi and Catharine themselves. Nothing has been saved. Nothing that may have been passed down to his children seemed to make it to the next. He didn't really have a lot of grandchildren anyway, so just things didn't really survive. So we have to rely on these extraneous objects that have been donated, but we can tie it to Levi and Catharine in some way.
And if not directly to the coffins, at least to the era, so that people can, especially children, they're not really as focused on the fact that it was Levi's wash basin or Catharine's, stool or what have you, as much as it is, wow, that's from the 1860s, 1840s.
Yeah, trying to explain how you go to the bathroom in those days is the one thing. The easiest way we can gross out third and fourth graders is sort of those daily activities. But they have those questions. And so the house, too, is a great representation of an early Indiana home in those early decades of the state. So for students, we can actually make those ties, which are also in the state curriculum, as well as being able to compare their life today to a life that's 150, 175 years ago.
Right. And one of the things that is surprising sometimes for children is the size of the rooms, the size of the house. It's by today's standards, it's a very small home. Mm-hmm. Even though it is 2 stories, the rooms are small. The total square footage is small, especially for what it was used for and the wealth of the people that owned and built the home. Right.
But Levi says they were very comfortable when they lived there, which, for them, this is a really nice house. I mean, to have a fireplace in almost every room, to have an all brick home. They have a lot of luxuries that some people couldn't afford in those days. It's hard to say that this man was wealthy, but I say that he's definitely a person of means to be able to not only afford that home, but to put a lot of the extra money behind his efforts. The extra food, the extra clothes, the extra supplies they needed to help freedom seekers. That was a weekly thing for them. There was really no stopping, Levi says. It was a weekly thing. So they're putting a lot of their own personal worth behind this particular activity.
So we hope we've encouraged our viewers to come to the site, to visit and see what this is all about. Where is, for people who may not know, the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site located?
Yeah. Well, I hear a lot of Wayne County people say, I've driven by it 100 times and I'm just now finally stopping. We're right on US 27. On the north edge of Fountain City. Fountain City is not a big town. You can drive through it in a minute. But if you're driving north, you'll see a big mural with Levi and Catharine on it. And we're just on the right-hand side, just past that. So we're not difficult to get to, right on the highway.
And for people who are planning a visit, where can they learn about visiting? We've had some restrictions in the spring of 2020, and things are opening back up. And one of the things that we try and promote here at Wayne County Connection is the things that make Wayne County a great place to work, live, and play. It's wonderful, but if you can't visit it, not so great. But now we can. So tell us a little bit about reopening.
Excuse me. So we reopen officially on June 19th to the public. We will be open on a schedule of Wednesday through Sunday, 5 days, and we'll be open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. But as you said, there'll be some restrictions. So according to the Department of Health, we have to operate at a 50% capacity. Normally in the summer, we see around 40 to 50 people. We're going to be looking at only 20 people per day. So we're encouraging individuals that if you're looking to come to visit, to please call in advance. And because we're only offering 2 guided tours a day, one at 10:30 in the morning, one at 1:30 in the afternoon, you can reserve spots ahead of time, and you'll just work with me to reserve those spots. So you can buy tickets online. You can find out more information at indianamuseum.org. There's a drop-down list for all of our historic sites. So you just find Levi site and click on that, and that'll take you to it. You do have the option to purchase tickets online, but just because you show up does not guarantee you that you may have a spot on that next tour if I already have 10 people that have been here before you. So it is a first come, first serve basis. That's why it's good to call ahead and try to reserve a specific date and time, and we can guarantee that for you to make it easier. But please also remember, we're only allowing 10 people per tour. So if you've got a family reunion going on and you want to bring all 25 people, can't do that until these restrictions are lifted, and we don't know when that's going to happen and how that's going to impact us. So if you think you're coming later in July or August or later in the year, just keep an eye on our social media. We're on Facebook or on our website, and we'll continue to update that with that updated information.
And as you said earlier, even if they do have a large group, there may be ways that you could accommodate a large group over the course of the day. If they call in advance and make some planning with you,
right.
And you'd be willing
to buy out the day. If you got 20 people, you can buy out the day.
You'd be really willing to work with them, because
it's bad for the people that did not know that and show up that day. But we're going to do our best to accommodate everybody. But even while we've been closed and I've been back on site working, I see people driving in. They're ready to come back. They're ready to visit. We know that's going to happen. We just want to do it in a very safe way. And we want to make sure that we're keeping our staff and volunteers safe, as well as our visitors. So yeah, we just have to work around those restrictions.
Well, Joanna, we're coming to the end of our program. We only have a couple of minutes left. And I would like to kind of spend this time talking about what's changed for our visitors, for our viewers over the course of the last 4 years, and also maybe a little bit about what plans are for the future. I know that you're always talking about bringing the history to life. So if you could talk about that for a couple of minutes, I think our viewers would be really interested.
Sure. So, if you haven't visited the site in the last 5+ years, the biggest change is the Interpretive Center. In the past too, the museum only operated on a seasonal basis. Basically, it was open if the volunteers could be here. And that was mainly in the summer months. Now we are open year round. We were operating 6 days a week. Now we're down to 5 days a week, again, to sort of help with sort of the restrictions we're dealing with right now. But if we can get past this and we can get back to where globally we're healthy again, we'll go back to being open 6 days a week year round. So that's really the biggest change. I mean, I still have people that pop the head in the door saying, are you open? Because they tried like 3 times in 20 years and it's not been open. So it's like, really, you're open. So that's really one of the biggest changes. But the other real way that we have grown as a site is trying to offer public programming. So going beyond what you can experience in the guided tour, having other reasons to come back to the site. We bring historic lecturers. We have authors who do book readings, and we've got artists that have come and worked at the site, and just sort of combining art and history. Again, because of some of the guidelines we're forced to work with, I'm not sure how that's going to impact our late summer and fall programs. But, this was the year where I had so much programming planned, more than we've ever done. And unfortunately, some of it, I had to push it all to the end of the year, and try to reschedule it. So hopefully we'll still be able to accommodate that. But it may have to be virtual, like what we're doing here, right? We're not in studio. We're talking virtually. So some of the programs we do may have to go virtual. So again, that's information we'll share as it becomes available, as we have to make adjustments and changes.
Joanna Hahn is the Central Regional Director for State Historic Sites based at the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site in Fountain City, Indiana, here in Wayne County. And we are so glad to have had you on the program today to talk about this excellent jewel here in Wayne County and to tell our viewers about how they can experience this great site. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to do it.
And we're excited for your future endeavors there, and we'll keep tabs with that, and then hopefully have you back and talk about what has changed and continue to improve there.
Anytime.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. I'm Michael Swigert, your host here on Wayne County Connection, promoting Wayne County as a great place to work, live, and play. Joanna mentioned a lot of events that are going on, and we'll have links at our website, waynet.org/cc, where you can find out more about the program and about ways to connect with the Levi and Catharine Coffin State Historic Site at their website and in social media and other ways that you can get connected to learn when's a good time and plan your visit. We encourage you to get involved with other activities that are going on in and around Wayne County this summer, and you can do that by visiting our calendar page, waynet.org/calendar. There you can find events and activities that are going on that are making Wayne County a great place to play. You can also find links on WayneNet, your source for all things local, to places that are making Wayne County a great place to also work and live. We encourage you to get involved and post your activities, events, and ideas on waynet.org as well. Again, I'm your host, Michael Swigert. On behalf of our producer, Jane Holman, the Wayne County Commissioners, all the staff at Whitewater Community Television, thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.